Mr. President, your Confirmation Committee held hearings to advise and consent to Dr. Kevin Melicher for the State Board of Higher Education on Wednesday, January 28th. Dr. Kevin Melicher is a semi-retired ophthalmologist from the Fargo area. He holds impressive credentials with academic appointments and very involved with professional and civics organizations such as the North Dakota Optometric Association, the North Dakota Board of Optometry, the United Way, and the Fargo School Board. The committee asked a series of questions for over an hour and a half. Questions were asked about the problems that have occurred over the last few years with the understanding that Dr. Melicher has only been serving for 7 months. We pressed the issue on how things were going to change for the better and how to make sure that these things do not happen again. The answer that we got was, quote, "We are trying to do the best of our abilities not to have these things happen again. I would tend to probably take a different bent on the part of that in that I think our university system has done pretty well in a lot of different areas," end of quote. We also have concerns regarding institutional autonomy and how they function as individual and unique educational facilities and still be part of the higher education system while operating within the overall master plan. We did not get a clear direction on how that would be addressed. Dr. Melicher did admit that some stability is needed in our state university system, and that starts with the chancellor, with the hope that a qualified replacement could be found. We questioned him about acquiring the Stanford nursing program and should the legislative process have been involved. He avoided the answer and replied, "It is my understanding that Stanford nursing program in Bismarck has been doing an excellent work. They have expanded the workforce of nurses to the western part of the state and north central part of the state. They have also pushed another nursing program in Bismarck to be stronger. So I think the part of the state, we have 2 very strong nursing programs now." We ask about the high rate of remedial needs with the problems of not graduating on time. Dr. Melicher stated that it was unacceptable and suggested better counselors. He had no knowledge of pending legislation or the position that the State Board of Higher Education has taken and has testified on. His comments of mid-level administration bloat and how the cost of operating has outpaced enrollments suggest that there is necessary to match the cost of getting high-quality employees. Other questions of trust, corporate partnerships, and the relationship between our 2-year colleges and 4-year institutions were discussed. Dr. Melicher seemed to have a grasp on the problems, but he did not have a clear idea how to address them. Dr. Melicher agrees to have sufficient background and experience to serve on the board, and he would have the time that it would take to commit to this board. He presented himself as an honest, open, and dedicated individual. Ordinarily, that would be enough if these were normal circumstances. But these are not normal circumstances, and we have real concerns with our state, with the higher education system. Dr. Melicher's general attitude was, in his words, "We have a few hiccups, but generally our colleges are doing a good job." This is where the committee would have to differ. We feel that there are some real issues and concerns with our higher educational system. A list of concerns include fraudulent enrollment reporting, degree fraudulently awarded, the REC building, the NDSU airplane, the Stanford School of Nursing, data breaches, tuition increases, open record violations, and open meeting violations that raise questions of serious concerns with the way things are being done. We are all proud of our university systems, and we're working to improve the education of our students. This is not an issue about the committee against Dr. Melicher or about the Senate and the differences with higher education. Our mission is clear, and that is to confirm the candidate who will become a member of a board that will lead the state higher education system. A board member's first responsibility is being a link between the State Board of Higher Education and the public. This link has been lost in the last few years. We need board members that will provide leadership to our college, the president, and the new chancellors. We need board members to recognize when inappropriate action is taking place and that current law and policies need to be followed. We need board members that have the fortitude to lead our state's higher educational system into the future. We are looking for a leader with passion, willingness to acknowledge the past problems, and with the fortitude to tackle them so we're not back in the same place 4 years from now. Mr. President, it is for these reasons that we advise to not consent Dr. Melicher to the State Board of Higher Education. And just for clarification, if you want to confirm Dr. Melicher, you vote green. If you do not wish to consent to the to the confirmation, you vote red.
Further discussion? Senator Nelson.
Well, Mr. President, I had the opportunity to serve on the school board with Dr. Melicher for 6 years. I found him very sound fiscally. I found him very quiet, but I always knew that if he didn't know the answer, he would go home and find the answers. He's not somebody who seeks the headlines. He seeks to get the work done. It's hard to find good volunteers to serve on the Board of Higher Education. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. I would encourage you to vote green on Kevin Melicher.
Further discussion? Senator Warner.
Mr. President, I rise in support of Kevin Melicher for the Board of Higher Education. I was on the committee, and I believe the divided recommendation of the committee that you have before us does not truly represent the committee on the actual nominee, but rather represents a near unanimous frustration with the general culture of the Board of Higher Education. I, for one, was very frustrated with the apparent passivity of the board, which came out during the interview, and I was concerned that the board seems to have very little curiosity about and was reluctant to issue directives about the relationship of the university system with the legislature. At one time during the hearing, I had an image of the board as a nest of baby birds being satisfied with carefully selected and partially digested morsels of information from the chancellor and the board office. Hardly the company of eagles that we're looking for to lead and direct this great enterprise in our university system. But, Mr. President, legislative frustration with the culture of the Board of Higher Education is not the question before us this afternoon. The various relationships between the board and the chancellor, and between the board and the presidents, and the board and the legislature will continue to evolve over the next years. We aren't yet where any of us want to be, but we can begin here today, developing that trust that we can begin moving in that direction. Mr. President, the decision before us today is on the qualifications of Kevin Melicher to serve on the Board of Higher Education. I was impressed during his interview with his candor and his willingness to serve. This board is one of the great lightning rods of North Dakota politics. Its every action is criticized and scrutinized with a fine-toothed comb. Finding people of integrity and intelligence to serve on this largely volunteer board is a difficult task. I know from conversations outside the interview that Kevin Melicher has a reputation as a quiet, dependable problem solver, a diligent researcher, and a hard worker. I'm convinced that as he grows into the task on the board, he will become an outstanding member and a great asset to the board. Mr. President, I urge a green light on the confirmation of Kevin Melicher.
Senator Armstrong.
Mr. President, my approach to the confirmation hearing was fairly simple. I had never met Dr. Melicher, and I had made no assumptions about him either in the positive or the negative, with the exception of the admiration that he was willing to volunteer his time and effort to a board that is essential to the betterment of our state. His resume is impressive. And knowing that he had only been on the board for 7 months, I did not think it was fair to hold him accountable for any problems the university system had encountered in the past. However, in my opinion, he performed very poorly in the interview. His inability to answer questions regarding recent issues and future direction of higher education in North Dakota were troubling to me. I understand that these hearings are stressful, and I understand that not everyone handles those situations in the same way. But higher education in North Dakota is a $1 billion a year enterprise, funded in no small part by taxpayer expense. And overseeing our institutions requires a certain skill set and level of engagement in issues that I did not feel were displayed during the confirmation hearing.
Further discussion? Senator Wardner.
Mr. President, I want to thank the confirmation committee. Did a great job. Mr. President, they asked great questions. Because of some of the issues that have come up in higher ed, we have elevated this process of the confirmation hearing for higher education to a little higher level. We've moved it to the big hearing room. We have encouraged senators to come down and listen. We've encouraged the public to come in. We've said we need to ask more relevant questions. And the committee did that. Everyone on the committee, in my opinion, did an excellent job. I would like to point out, and we were attacked, and I am standing up for this body, and I'm standing up for that confirmation committee, that there's petty politics involved in this decision by this committee. And that is not true. Mr. President, it is not true. Number one, we had the hearing on Wednesday. The committee didn't come back until Monday, and we're having the hearing on the floor of the Senate today. Ample time in between for the committee to digest the information. There was no arm twisting from leadership, neither from myself or from my colleague on the loyal opposition. The committee made up their own minds. And many of you were down there and listened to the hearing, and you made up your own mind. You are not hearing it secondhand. You saw it for yourself. I really have a hard time with comments like this. Subcommittee vote came after nearly 2 hours of grilling. Ladies and gentlemen, it was not grilling. I thought the committee were very professional in their questioning. If they didn't get the answer, they gently asked a second time in another way. Sometimes it says in the editorial, hostile subcommittee, they were hostile in response to civil responses that reflected the candidate's seriousness about education. He's a great individual, and I'll talk about that in a minute. No, they didn't badger him. They weren't hostile. They wanted to know. They just wanted to know. We all wanted to know. We were all hoping for the answer, and we could say yes. The committee talked about and tagged the nominee with responsibility for situations before the nominee was nominated and before he joined the board. No, they weren't. They were giving him situations, and yes, they did happen before. But they were asking, how would you handle this situation? In my experience, when we would hire individuals in the education profession, we gave them issues and said, how would you handle this? I don't think that was out of line. I thought it was good questioning. Lawmakers regurgitated old grievances with the university system. Well, I just heard a list of things, and they aren't all old. There may be a couple, but I don't think so. Most of them are things that have been happening over the last 2 years. We care about the university system. It's not about politics. This one, we'll show them who's in charge. I'll stand up for every one of you in this body. I have never seen that attitude in here. This is the Senate. We treat people with respect. And talk about petty politics rather than higher education. I disagree. And it says if it was about politics and power plays, the bets are off. I don't know how the vote's going to come out today. I really don't. But if it's about education, the nominee will be confirmed. Well, I'll tell you what. It's about the direction of the Board of Higher Ed and the education of our young people in higher education. I'd like to talk about the nominee. Distinguished, impeccable credentials. This is not about him and what he does. Community, time, and service. He served on boards and commissions. He helps those in need. 4 pages on his bio. United Way, Division Chair, President of the Fargo School Board, Treasurer in Negotiations, Fargo School Board, Dakota Medical Foundation, North Dakota State University, Health Grant Advisory. It goes on and on. Family fund grants, 3 scholarships their family has. A year of giving. Eye Care Associates donated over 300 pairs of glasses to help other people see. And it goes on and on. He is a giving man. And he is a man of professional excellence. He really is a man after my own heart. He's a humble man, and he's honest. And he's hardworking. He told in the interview, going to 6 campuses already, and digging in. Talking to other people on the Board of Higher Ed, they say he does dig in. And so you're saying now, well, what's the issue? Well, the issue was he didn't answer the questions as complete as I think we needed to have them, to know that he understands the direction of higher ed. In my opinion, it may not be your opinion, but the Board of Higher Ed needs to drive the bus. They need to lead the parade. It should be the board, the chancellor, and then the campuses. Criticized. We were criticized for the questions. I'm talking about the confirmation committee. I will give you a few and then I will quit, Mr. President. One of them was elaborate on what your vision is for our current technical and 2-year programs. I don't see that as badgering. Can you explain your evaluation process for presidents? Talking about the 360 evaluation and go over the process. It's in the news. Pertinent question. Honoring institutional autonomy. In his opening remarks, he mentioned that. That was a fair question. What are you expecting of the new chancellor and how they will relate to the presidents? Is the chancellor a facilitator, or is he a leader of the board, or is he leading the board? A question that should be answered. How do you think the university system and board should implement a change? You know, I was an educator. The old veteran teachers never wanted to change. It's a part of education. It's a challenge in education. And it's a good question. How do you deal with that? Because there really is no mechanism to force any particular campus to change. How are we going to do that? How will we get our students more prepared to enter into higher education? And if you say, well, he's only on the job for 7 months, brand new, the candidate was on a school board. His spouse was a teacher. What would you plan for universities that do inappropriate spending? What about presidents doing their own thing and not following the master plan or what is better for the state? Do you step on the chancellor's toes or the president's toes if it's best for the state? Give us an answer, yes or no, and explain. How do you envision the university of the 21st century in terms of physical location, perhaps its culture, and its sense of community? Those were the questions, some of them. I couldn't give them all, but those were some of the questions that were asked by the committee. And so I want to make sure that as we go forward, and whatever happens today and how you vote, that is your personal decision. But I want everybody to know, and I'm going on record as saying, this was not petty politics. It was never about politics. It was about finding the right person as far as the direction of the Board of Higher Education. Thank you.
Senator Judy Lee.
Mr. President, I thank you for the opportunity to make just a very brief comment. I've heard it said that several of the people who support this candidate are maybe not taken quite so seriously because we're from the same home area. But I would offer the thought that those are probably the people who know him best. And I've heard, excuse me, heard from colleagues in our home area who have known Dr. Melicher for many years, known the candidate for many years, and have very positive things to say about him. I understand that he's not aggressive, that the way the answers came weren't the way the committee wished to hear it. I was listening as well. I was there, and I understand some of those concerns. I think we become quite accustomed to very direct questions and very direct answers because of the time constraints that we have in our committees. It may be a little less familiar process for others, one with which people get acquainted fairly rapidly. So I offer that thought because I think we need to make sure that capable, honorable people who step forward and are willing to serve and go through all of this are deserve to have our serious consideration also. And I am confident that if he is confirmed and is moved forward during the rest of this term, that he, as well as the rest of the board, will know that everyone's going to be watching.
Senator Schneider.
Mr. President, like the senator from District 13, I'll be very brief in my remarks. I want to thank the majority leader for his impassioned speech. And certainly, if there are accusations of politics, it's not about partisan politics. It's certainly not the case here, as you can tell by the committee vote on this qualified nominee. And this nominee is eminently qualified. He's a volunteer in his community. He is the kind of person who's been very active in numerous causes. He's obviously well educated. That said, I have some pretty serious concerns about what the nominee had to say at his confirmation hearing. And just to point out one that's near and dear to my district, Mr. President, about half the voters in District 42 are students at the University of North Dakota, is college affordability. And the nominee was asked about college affordability on a couple of different occasions. I'm taking this quote directly from the transcript. The nominee said that tuition at our four-year universities are not too far out of line with the national averages. Mr. President, that's not something to aspire to be average nationally. And the fact of the matter is, we're not average when it comes to student debt. Taking this straight from the project on student debt, North Dakota led in the percentage of students who borrowed for college. 83% of students in North Dakota finance their college education with debt. Nevertheless, Mr. President, I am going to give the nominee the benefit of the doubt. I think the senator from District 13 might have been onto something. Those of us who practice law or participate in the legislative process here in the Senate, they may be used to tough questions. And those tough questions are the ones that we should be asking here as a Senate. I applaud the majority leader for his renewed focus on our advise and consent role that we play here in the Senate. We should not just be potted plants when it comes to confirming these nominees. They're here to answer hard questions, and a good nominee can do themselves a lot when they answer those hard questions well. My concern is that the board may not learn those lessons about college affordability, may not learn the importance of conducting meetings in public in accordance with the law by rejecting a nominee who has been on the board for a couple of months. In fact, Mr. President, I think if we are to reject this nominee, that there may not be many who are willing to take this thankless job. And so I'm casting a yes vote with deep concerns about some of the comments that were made at the confirmation hearing, and also with great hope that the board will take this floor fight today as a soft lesson.
Any further discussion? Senator Flacco.
Well, Mr. President, I've known Kevin Melicher long enough to know how to pronounce his name, which isn't easy to do right away, but I've known him for probably nearly 20 years. Originally, I met him when I served as general manager of the minor league baseball team, and he was our team eye doctor. And at all times, he was professional, measured in his response, and in the field he was, that as I told someone earlier, you know, sometimes you have to be very cool. It's not about being the rah-rah field general or anything like that. This is about making hard decisions. That's one of the things that people like about when they come to the Senate. We're very measured, we think about things, we're deliberative in our process, and I think that he reflects those same values. You know, I sometimes wonder, you know, some of the things that were mentioned, and I think we, you know, continue to need to look forward as we think about this. You know, are we trying to steer the direction of the board, which we do sometimes legislatively in appropriate ways, or are we talking about the competency, the credentials, the ability of this candidate? And some of the things that I know that aren't even on here, I think he's been an adjunct faculty on campuses in 5 states, I think. So he has a breadth of experience, not just within the state of North Dakota. And sometimes we do brand people based upon who they follow or who they're associated with. Sometimes we ask ourselves, you know, how many of us would want to be tied to whoever preceded us in office, or sometimes our running mates who we don't always agree with when we run. So to bring up issues that have been in, you know, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, or whatever, I don't think are fair in the case of anyone. When he was on the school board, at that time, as the senator from District 21 said, those were the most challenging times in terms of governance and all related matters and the tug and pull that was going on within the Fargo community. And he became president, and throughout that period of time, they got the ship righted. And that is what we need, those same qualities in our Board of Higher Education, because we all know and recognize there are major challenges out there. And I think Dr. Kevin Melicher is someone who can and will bring those. He's hugely dedicated. We all recognize he's very new to the board. He's still learning, much like if you're in this session, you're still trying to figure out where all the bills are and everything. If you're a freshman serving in your first session, just think you've spent more days, as 23 days, serving in the Senate than he's had to serve on the Board of Higher Education in terms of days with the board. So there are so many things to learn as a senator. There are so many things to learn on the Board of Higher Education, and we all need to work together to do that. And as was said earlier, I mean, we've had a number of people that have resigned or chose not to run again, and I worry if we continue down this path that we will have a pool that continues to become, or starts to become, maybe a better phrase, a pool that we really can't be proud of, and we'll have some real challenges. So I think we have before us an exceptional candidate. I've been on those committees since 2001, on and off, and have sat in on many that I wasn't. And I'll be honest, that wasn't his best interview. I've talked to him other times about different things, and he does a much finer job than he did on that day, and maybe he was trying to be polite and courteous to things, but he is very measured in his approach, and I think if he is on the board, we will have a change, and great things will happen, much like what happened when he became a member of the school board, because he is not afraid, because we should not confuse politeness and courtesy, as was deemed appropriate to that setting, with the inability to make those hard choices to say, this person needs to go, this person needs to change, we need to change for the better what's going on in higher education, and I fully believe that Dr. Kevin Melicher can do that, and I will be voting green.
Senator Dever.
Mr. President, I'm torn. I don't doubt the qualifications of the candidate. I don't know the candidate personally. I know people who know him that speak very highly of him. I don't doubt his passion. I don't doubt his compassion. At the same time, the people of North Dakota own the university system. People in North Dakota are represented by the members of the Board of Higher Education. They need to run the system. Part of the problem with the university system, I think, is just the nature of the system. We hire high-caliber people to serve as presidents of universities, and they go and they run their universities and they build them up and they do really good things for their universities, and then we ask them to be team players. And they're just not built that way. But they need to take their direction from the people and who they're represented by. So I'm not sure how we send a message to the Board of Higher Ed on what the expectations are in bringing that about. We could expect people to come to us with that enthusiasm for building the system that way, or we could somehow, I don't know how, to send a message that you need to build yourself up to that expectation. So, Mr. President, when the majority leader said he doesn't know how the vote's going to go, I don't know either, because I don't know how I'm going to vote. So if anybody stands up and says they agree with me, we're in big trouble.
Senator Klein.
Well, Mr. President, I was the chairman of that confirmation hearing. And I'm going to tell you up front, I am supporting Mr. Melicher, because by the time I'm done, you'll think it's somewhat of a weak endorsement. But he is a nice guy, and he's new, and I think I felt cutting him a bit of slack. I recall, and it was commented earlier from the senator from 44 that we're new. When we're new here, we learn a lot of things. It's sometimes hard to get up to speed, and every session we learn something new. Did he answer the questions correctly? I have probably chaired 3 or 4 of these over the few sessions I've been here. And, we all think that the questions are close, but not quite what we want. Certainly it could be, there could be a lot more there. So I thought about this a lot. I don't know, it's been one of those weeks whereby Ag Day comes out at 5 in the morning, Mr. President, so you can do a lot of thinking early on. And I was laying there the other morning, I was thinking about Mr. Melicher and his profession as an optometrist, as an eye professional. And how many times in his career he said to his patient, is this one, or how about this one? The first, or was it the second? Is this one better, or is this one worse? Well, Mr. President, I don't know if it's this one or the next. And I don't know if this is going to be better than the next, but I do know we've had our concerns, and we've had our concerns with the Board of Higher Ed. Can Mr. Melicher fix them? I think we can give him a chance. I think he'll show that he can. But if not this one, is this one going to be better or worse?
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none, members of the Senate, confirmation requires a majority of senators elect. That number is 24, reminding the Senate that if you wish to confirm Dr. Melicher, that is a green vote for confirmation. If you wish to not confirm, that is a red vote against confirmation. The question being, will the Senate advise and consent to the nomination of Kevin Melicher to the North Dakota State Board of Higher Education? Secretary, please open the key. All senators, register your vote. All senators have voted. Any senator wishing to change their vote? Secretary, close the key. Final tally, 27 senators voting yea, 18 senators voting nay, 2 senators absent and not voting. The Senate does advise and consent to the nomination of Kevin Melicher to the North Dakota State Board of Higher Education. Senator Klein.
Mr. President, I move that the